Welcome to Putting It Together, the podcast that goes through the entire body of work of Stephen Sondheim, show by show and song by song. My name is Kyle Marshall, your self-described Sondheim expert. I feel like I should be noodling around on an acoustic guitar here right now, talking about love and life and just make love, not war, man, in preparation for this week's song. But I'm not going to do that because I don't want to. Instead, we're going to get right into this week's episode, so enjoy the discussion about Unworthy of Your Love.
I am nothing, you are wind and water and sky. Jody, tell me, Jody, how I can earn your love. I would swim oceans, I would move.
Chris Brown, thank you so much for coming back to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me back. I was very excited to see your message coming in.
This show is so quintessentially American, and I thought, boy, I really need to pack on as many Americans as I can. I was mistakenly under the impression that you were a singer-songwriter from the 1970s, so that's my bad. I honestly thought that was your backstory. But I still think that there's going to be a lot of good discussion here.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited to get into it.
You know, you've been here before, of course, so we've heard your history with musical theater, your history with Stephen Sondheim. What is your history with this show, with Assassins?
Assassins was definitely one that I picked up later into my Sondheim history lessons, I guess, because at least whenever I first heard about it, it was still kind of it was more of a musical that you don't talk about just because of the nature of it. And then a few years ago, I got to see a local university do a production the only production of it that I've seen, but I would put it up against a bunch of things. It's I still think about it. I've still tried to find bootleg copies of it. I even talked to the professor recently because it was one of his first shows that he did. And he's currently, there may be more than one Hamilton tour going on, but he's the music director for the Hamilton tour that's current in the US. It was really impactful to me and very different than listening to the album, but actually getting to sit in the audience. And they made a lot of use of having the characters directly stare at the audience and point their guns at you.
Yeah, make it a bit unsettling while
you're
in the theater.
It was very this makes me uncomfortable, and I think that's good. It makes me something.
Yeah, and so Sondheim writes about this in his book, about how he probably wouldn't, and while he was alive, wouldn't have turned down the offer, but it's why he thinks this works best as a theater piece, because there is absolutely a fundamental difference between a character in a movie pointing a gun at the camera, because there is still a disconnect, there's still the screen that's separating you, and a person on stage pointing a gun at you sitting as an audience member in a theater. There is a fundamental difference in that experience.
Yeah, it made me feel, for better or for worse, that I was part of the show that I was watching. They weren't just characters anymore. It reminded me of the reality of these characters as, historical events.
So to that point, there's a few things that you've mentioned here. One, a point that I keep bringing up, but I think is so key to the success, the artistic success to this show, in my opinion, is the fact that this can be done very inexpensively, or you can be very opulent with it if you really chose to do so. This would work in a completely black box theater with nothing but prop guns, or you could do some really fancy set design and prop design and costuming and that sort of thing. You don't need to blow your budget on other stuff. It is still effective no matter what scale you want to do it in. The other thing, though, is that even from 1990 up until today, so for 34 years that this show has been in existence, I think it is a show that requires you to go and at least talk about it with someone after you leave the theater for a bit. It's I just need to figure out what my feelings are. I have to discuss this out, because there's a lot of stuff that they're throwing at you, and in many ways having you feel like you're culpable to what is going on stage as an audience member. And I think that is not something that is completely frivolous entertainment, but it's lean in. You have to engage with this show to a certain level. And I think why there's been such negative reactions to it for certain productions, because people are just I don't know, I don't like how this makes me feel.
Right, because I don't think you can say that it's not it's not that sometimes works are fluffy and easy and
Hmm.
gentle. There's commentary, strewn throughout the shows, and everything means something. But this, it makes it so hard to avoid because it's not layered in nuance. It's just it's a documentary come to life. It's interacting with kind of the taboo.
Not to like spoil, I guess, the discussion of when that song comes up here in this series, but it's why I think it is so necessary to have that song Something Just Broke, because it allows the audience to like have that moment of, I think, of catharsis, whether it is the actual events as depicted. There's going to be people in the audience that are going to like remember the Kennedy assassination. They're going to remember the Ronald Reagan attempt, perhaps the Gerald Ford attempt. Absolutely, as we are recording this, people are going to remember the Donald Trump attempt of assassination. So like there's these feelings, I think, that bubble up in this, is like you remember where you were, you understand what it feels like when you heard this news. And so this is not just like a fairy tale that's dealing in metaphors, or like this demon barber that feels like part like tall tale and I can have fun with it. It's something fundamentally different. This is actually stuff that I personally have lived through, and I knew what it felt like at that time when this event happened.
Right. And sure, there's aspects of it that are, I don't remember where I was for John Wilkes Booth, but,
Right.
and probably not a large percent of the audience would. However, with just the timeline that it spans, like it's going to be relevant, if not through direct lived experience, through a recent experience, through one that is you're reminded of. And when you're talking about with Trump, yeah, it's how can you not compare that to this? How can you
Right.
not think of where would this fall in that? What type of ballad or little jaunt would that character, well, not just a character, it's a real person,
Yeah, yeah.
that would bring to this show.
You pose an interesting question to me before we started recording. And I do kind of want to bring it up. I don't want to be gauche or cute about this. Like, I don't mean to like trivialize anything here. But you did ask, like, if you were to add in a song about the attempt on Donald Trump's life, what would that song be? And the answer is like, I don't know. What's really fun about this show, fun is maybe the wrong word, but what is really interesting about this show is how like every song is from the time period that it's depicting. So we're about to go here into 70s ballad, but we can go to like Sousa March or like spirituals or whatever it happened to be, what like the big song style was at the time. And so I was trying to rack my brain, like, yeah, what would it be for this that would like fit him specifically? And like it would have to be some sort of like pop song, I think, but I have no idea. It would feel weird if it was like modeled after Taylor Swift or something like that, but like she is like the biggest pop star at the time, so that's the only thing I can think of.
Right. And does the genre itself
Inform,
inform,
yeah.
right? Does it imply meaning and intent? And because I think that's a different discussion all of itself. If this were being written currently, there'd be people that I'm sure, just as with when it was written, that would take offense that this song was portrayed, this moment in the story was portrayed with this style of music, because that's so antithetical to what it might be.
Well, I mean, I think also that is very much similar to that is something I do want to spend some time on here discussing, which is this song, Unworthy of Your Love, features two people that are still alive. These people are real people that are still alive, that a lot of people, depending on your age, I suppose, but a good portion of people are going to be familiar with the events surrounding their notoriety, for lack of a better term. And I've always wondered if that really informs it, because can you imagine? I mean, especially when we're talking about something as evil as the Manson family, they've affected real people with what the terror that they caused. And I often wonder about stuff like this. If maybe I'm overthinking it, but it's like, how would I feel if I went to a show and there was a dramatization of the person who like killed my aunt or whatever, killed a family member of mine? Would it feel gross? Would it feel like, well, you're like really taking something that was like an awful experience and just making something that people are going to pay $50 to come and see? Back in 1990, it's going to be like $150 now. But like, I don't know how you would, if you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, we keep seeing more and more that becoming more and more of reality with the rise of true crime. And
Yeah.
it's kind of, I don't want to say unchecked, but it seems like we're creating media that is more constantly like sensationalizing the worst parts of our stories. And
Hmm.
we keep seeing backlash from people with these stories that are released, especially if it's about, murders or, other scandals, and it's people that are still very much alive or their family members are alive. And, they're saying, I never gave permission for this story to be told. And I know it's part of the
Right.
public record, but what you're doing is different than a newspaper article.
Right. Yeah. You're getting some sort of financial gain out of this story, right? And
Mhm.
yeah, there is something that feels a little bit gross to that, and I have to admit to that, because not quite the same thing, but similar enough, which is how I have often felt, and especially now that I have like a niece and nephew who are both under the age of 10, the like the family lifestyle vloggers that you see on YouTube and stuff like that, that
Uh-huh.
use their children and themselves and their whole lives are a storyline and that they project onto the internet. And it always feels a little gross to me to do that. And we've actually seen some backlash to that recently with, kids get to a certain age and like, I don't want to do this. So like I said, not the same exact thing, but as our world turns to everybody is turning their lives into content, it just feels like we've lost something somewhere along the way. Something just broke is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, because we're seeing that more and more with, there's legal repercussions for these family vloggers.
Hmm.
There's, I think the first, I would say like the first family would be the John and Kate +8, and
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
we've seen those children grow up, and I just saw something the other day from one of them who's like, I don't have contact with my siblings, and
Right.
it's in that same vein, it's wild to think that someone. It's crazy to think that someone says, "Oh, I'm auditioning to be John Hinckley Jr." And if you don't have context for it, I mean, even if you do have context, it's like, what do you mean you're auditioning to be the American
Hmm.
assassin? What like how have we gotten to that point?
I guess the last thing, because, this could be a podcast unto itself about the ramifications of portraying real life people. But I will pitch the movie if people have not checked it out yet and you have a Netflix subscription. The movie May December that came out last year, the Todd Haynes film, it has Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore in it. But it deals with a lot of this idea about an actress coming to a family because she's going to portray the mother in a movie.
Oh,
Based on something that happens. I don't want to ruin the surprise for people.
sure.
But a large part of the subtext of that film specifically is like actors who portray real people who are still alive. There is a predatory nature to that in some way.
Mhm.
Whether you mean to or not, you are using them for your own gain. It's an interesting concept, and you can fall into the weeds with this, like how morally you feel about that sort of thing. This is all my hand wringing to just bring up the fact that I get why some people might push back against this show, and especially this section we're about to get into,
Sure.
when it's starting to deal with like the people who are affected by this are still alive. So like that's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. It's yeah, it's real people, but as Law and Order, it's a not influenced by anything, not depicting anything real.
Right.
These are their stories, but these are their stories, and this is real.
Yeah. And then that's where I put the dun-dun in post.
Exactly.
And hey everyone, just Kyle breaking into the conversation to tell you about some of the people who help this show continue to go. If you'd like to help support the show for absolutely free, you can give a rating and review on whatever app you use to listen to podcasts to. That's of course greatly appreciated. Putting It Together is an independent podcast, so if you'd like to help monetarily, which will only help to grow and make this show better, you can do so over at our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/puttingittogetherpodcast. Please do not donate if it impacts you negatively financially. I do need to give a huge thank you to the God That's Good tier from Patreon. That's Alex, Barry, Christopher, David, Jack, Luis, Michael, Mika, Robert, Stephen, and Whitty. All right, let's get back to the show. So, to that point, what song are we talking about here today?
We are talking about Unworthy of Your Love.
If you can recall, do you remember where this song shows up within the show? What is happening directly before this?
Oh, I think it's let's see, it's the beginning of Act 2.
Yes and no. I've only seen this show as a one act, so I don't know if they've broken it up into
Well, maybe not in
different
an
acts.
intermission sense.
Regardless, anyways, yes. So
Whenever I first looked into the show, but it to me it's interesting that it's not purely chronological.
yeah, it jumps around all over the place. Yeah.
Right? That we're not just building towards, because part of the story happens before the rest of the story has happened.
Mm-hmm.
like with Oswald and everything.
You're right. And that's something we brought up in a previous episode too, whereas like that could have absolutely been an idea at one point that they went through this show chronologically.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I love doing things chronologically, you can just look at this podcast for an example. I think this show would feel too much like you're at a history lesson if it was done chronologically. I think you're right that it actually somewhat goes against the theme it's trying to bring up here too, which is like, this is happening all throughout time. Like it doesn't really, we don't have to talk about this chronologically. This is always happening.
We're in this limbo sense of, and I just imagine it for whenever this was first presented, or if you're just someone that is not familiar with it, but you go to see it anyway, by jumping around in time, you aren't aware of what other characters may appear in their context.
Mm-hmm. This is the second of two songs in the show that feature would-be assassins, meaning assassins who were unsuccessful at what they were attempting to do. The other one being How I Saved Roosevelt, where you see Zangara trying to assassinate a president, but actually not actually doing so. The two people that are inside this scene is we have John Hinckley Jr., who was going to go and assassinate Ronald Reagan. We'll tell you why in a moment. And then we have Squeaky Frome. I actually have now forgotten what her actual first name is. Lynette Squeaky Frome.
Yeah, Squeaky is not her. It
was not her Christian name. Yeah. She is out to try and kill Gerald Ford. To the best of my knowledge, they never interacted with each other. This is a scene that has been created for this show, as far as I understand it. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I'm pretty sure that they never actually met each other.
I think that's true. I think what's interesting is that the moment that they intersect in the show, at that point in their lives, they would be like the same age, like 26 and 20.
Right. I'm using my guests to be basically my history teacher. Not that we have to go and do like a dissertation on any of these people, but can you maybe fill in the gaps of like who John Hinckley was and why he was going after Ronald Reagan at that time?
Right. Well, John Hinckley Jr. was an aspiring musician or a hobbyist musician in his own right, and he believed he loved Jodie Foster, who at the time of
the actual actress Jodie Foster.
Yeah. At the she was 19 at this time, and he really believed that if he killed Ronald Reagan, that would, prove his worth and get Jodie Foster's attention. I'm not sure where where that idea came to.
Like how that conflated in his mind.
But he was determined to do it. And so, he was motivated by love, ?
Yeah. There's a lot of things that were motivating him. I don't know if anything sane was motivating him, to be perfectly honest. There was something that got corrupted there that he really thought this was the way to win her heart. Now, he was wrong on multiple different counts, if you know anything about Jodie Foster. But I will say, just as an aside to this, Jodie Foster never talks about this and never has spoken his name. Like if an interviewer is asked her about him, she will not say like John Hinckley. It's always the guy.
Interesting. Okay.
But she never really engages with it. She does not like talking about it, which I understand. Like if this was someone coming after me, it's probably not something I would love to like discuss on the red carpet. So yeah, that's him. Again, as we said at the beginning, both of these people still alive. John Hinckley just released a album of music that you can go and listen to. If that's something that you're interested in, you can. I have purposely not gone and listened to it because it's like that really feels wrong to me to go and buy music from the guy.
Right.
Even if it's just streaming a few cents, I get it, but whatever.
Right. As many as the different qualms you may have about the idea of Assassins, the show, that may seem a little too far.
Yeah, a little too far, bridge too far. Okay, so Lynette Squeaky Frome, who is she, and why was she going after Gerald Ford?
So she, Squeaky, was part of the Manson family and was, deeply in love with Charles Manson. Very much a nature lover, from what I understand. It was her intention that this was, going to bring about some environmental change or awareness if she assassinated Gerald Ford.
Yeah, there's something within that too, where she really thought that it would like also bring out Charles Manson's message more.
Right, like
she killed the president. Like there was that motivation that was there too. I will say, if people are looking for whatever reason to learn more about the Manson family, and how it kind of tied into Hollywood and the music scene at the time, because there's a lot of moving pieces there. There was a great podcast called You Must Remember This, which is all about the history of Hollywood. The host, Karina Longworth, did a whole mini season, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years ago now, just on the Manson family, how that started, who they intersected with, and the fallout of everything. I think it's a kind of a must listen. It doesn't really actually go much into the family necessarily. It really just says like how it impacted the wider culture, which I found fascinating specifically. Those are the two people here. Those are the presidents that they're going after. Both of them unsuccessful, but both attempt it. This is where I admit people have heard this admission before, but I feel it's worth bringing up again, which is I was the person who always just listened to cast albums without looking at any context behind the show.
Mm-hmm.
So other than knowing that this was a show about assassins, and even from the beginning song, you kind of understand, oh, okay, so there's a bunch of assassins meeting, and now we're going to go and learn about them. I really hated this song the first time I listened to it. It sounded too treacly to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what is Sondheim doing in this? Like, I didn't get it. And the vast majority of the reason being, I thought this was absolutely earnest. I thought it was two people singing about being in love with each other.
Right, which is what it comes across as.
Yeah, without context, it sounds like Jodie, that he's singing to, is the woman that is in the scene with him, but it's not. He's singing to a picture of Jodie Foster, and she is speaking to Charlie, but he's not Charlie. She is speaking to Charlie Manson. Once that is explained to me, it's like, oh, okay, so that puts a whole new spin on this song then. But if you just looked at it without any context, it does come across as being like, this is pretty treacly sweet, and I don't know if I really like it. But
at the same time, it's, I wonder because all of their other ensemble numbers and things, the idea to put the two of these people together for this song, it's almost they get to be each other's unavailable, I don't want to say partner, because, it's not that, not all of these were relationships, but the fact that they get to hear the other person sing, to them in a way that maybe they're wanting or missing out on.
So just a really interesting way to like portray the feelings of these two characters inside this scene. But yes, without context, this song does come across, I think, in a bit of a different way than what it's intended to be. I said treacly sweet, and I think what I just mean is it felt like there wasn't a lot of there, but I think there is once you kind of like unpack what's going on.
Well, and without context, it really just seems like this could be in any musical. This just seems like the moment that they're together, finally.
Mm-hmm. So this, depending on the recording you have or which album you're listening to, there is a bit of a book scene that can start this, where you have John Hinckley speaking to the picture, the photograph of Jodie Foster, and he says, "My dearest Jodie, I'm humiliated by my weakness and my impotence, but Jodie, I can change. I'll prove to you that I can change with one brave historic act. I will win your love now and for all eternity. Love, John." He's writing a letter, if that's not clear. Then he starts singing, and he sings, "I am nothing. You are wind and water and sky. Jodie, tell me, Jodie, how I can earn your love. I would swim oceans. I would move mountains. I would do anything for you. What do you want me to do? I am unworthy of your love. Jodie, Jodie, let me prove worthy of your love. Tell me how I can earn your love. Set me free. How can I turn your love to me?"
I am nothing. You are wind and water and sky. Jodie, tell me, Jodie, how I can earn your love. I would swim oceans, I would move mountains, I would do anything for you. What do you want me to do? I am unworthy of your love. Jodie, Jodie, let me prove worthy of your love. Tell me how I can earn your love. Set me free. How can I turn your love to me?
I mean, it's a lot for someone that you don't know, which is also, there's also somehow this Romeo and Juliet aspect to it, of this magical love that knows no bounds, no rhyme nor reason.
Mhm.
Which again,
It really does feel like, yeah, like a 15-year-old's idea of what love is. It's like, I'm going to swim oceans. I'm going to move mountains. There's all those platitudes that you think you're supposed to say when you're young.
well, and yeah, and that against the juxtaposition of the backdrop of what's actually happening.
I mean, one of the other big things I think about this show is, and I don't think very subtly either, is this idea that America itself, the American dream itself, is corrupted somehow, because he continually says, like, let me prove that I'm worthy of you. Like, I have to prove to you that I'm a great man. Now, that just so happens that he thinks he has to go and kill the president, which, doesn't make sense. But regardless, like that he thinks he's thinking in grand terms. Like, I have to have this huge show of affection for you to be won over by me. It's interesting here too, because there is some rhyming that happens in these verses, but a lot of them is just love, 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 and which is very indicative of, I think, some 70s pop songwriting. I think Sondheim is trying his best here to be that, and I do think he kind of does nail the at least the beginning part here of it feeling like a 70s ballad.
Yeah, well, and it feels like the Carpenters, it's like insert Carpenters-esque of the time, and you can be like, oh yeah, this is them.
But those rhymes that I'm just going to point out here, he is rhyming like Jody with free, and then like and sky with how I is also in there. So he's trying his best. He's doing some little mini rhymes, I think, that are going on here. Honestly, this is the song I would have loved him to write about more inside of his book. He doesn't really write about this song at all, which is unfortunate, because he was pretty dismissive or in some cases outright critical of pop music. I just don't think he would ever have been allowed himself to be like, I'm just going to do like slant rhymes or half rhymes inside this song, which would have been happening for a lot of this stuff anyways. He's like, no, I'm going to do it as far as I can, but I still have to have rhymes in this.
Right. Well, and to me, it reads more like love letters that just happen to have music behind them and not necessarily, I don't think of this fitting the lyrics and the music like so much if Sondheim does. This really just seems like we're going to present these two different love letters to you. There is going to be music with them. It is going to be good music. This is not a fast song. This is not.
No.
We want you to hear every single word that is being said, sometimes repeatedly, for you to just get what is happening here. Although
that's right.
Out of context, meaning can change, but there's not nuance here hardly at all.
The fact that you're using love 7 times in this series, it's like, okay, yeah, we get it. This is also like the example of someone coming on maybe just a bit too strong. You're like, all right, like, but this is where we get kind of the response to that. Well, not really a response, but just like an addition to that, because we get Frome's contribution here where she sings, I am nothing, you are wind and devil and God. Charlie, take my blood and my body for your love. Let me feel fire, let me drink poison, tell me to tear my heart in two, if that's what you want me to do. I am unworthy of your love, Charlie, darling. I have done nothing for your love. Let me be worthy of your love, set you free.
I am nothing. You are wind and devil and God. Charlie, take my blood and my body for your love. Let me feel fire, let me drink poison, tell me to tear my heart in two, if that's what you want me to do. I am unworthy of your love, Charlie darling. I have done nothing for your love. Let me be worthy of your love, set you free.
A lot different, I'll just say, from the Hinckley verses.
Yeah, still committed and
Sure.
Passionate, but a little more. Well, no, I mean, this is reckless. This is reckless love. This is I'm
like we're going from like this idealized, like you said, like Romeo and Juliet version of like, I'll swim oceans, I'll climb mountains, to let me feel fire and drink poison. I'm like, oh, okay, like we're
going to like Thelma and Louise sort of.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, and I think that right after the mention of like devil and God, but then we're also going to say, take my blood and my body, that's like the sacrament and communion. And it's such a weird
Mm-hmm.
thing to have just right next to the idea of devil and God, and also take of my blood and my body, and
Mm-hmm.
just have that thrown right up against each other.
I know, yeah, but I think very clearly separating the not really motivations, but just like the feelings you get from these two people. I don't want to make excuses for anyone, but John Hinckley going off the deep end and going after a president is one thing. It is a little bit different than being part of the family who is calculating going and killing a bunch of people. Like I think that we're seeing the tendrils of a little bit more than just like single focus on killing a president to being like we're killing multiple people within this group.
And I'm going to let you say that.
Great.
Well, and because if I'm not mistaken, like Fromm was part of the family, but like this was an actual close connection with Charles, correct?
I thought so. Yeah, maybe I should read up more about it. I don't know if she actually ever killed anyone. I better check that out. She was definitely there when stuff happened, but I don't know if she was the person who like put the blade in. I guess I don't know as much about the Manson murders as I should. Yeah, but does anyone need to know enough about that though?
There'll be another docuseries or another reenactment of something, unfortunately. But
yes, as far as I know, she actually did know.
Yeah, this is a real connection with this, and which makes it better or worse depending on which way you're looking at this, I guess.
By the way, I am just noticing, like right now as we're speaking, that he's rhyming poison with darlin. Like that is what, because there's no G at the end of darlin. Like that's the rhyme that he's doing there. And that there you have it, folks. Sondheim knows something about rhyming things together.
Oh, that's crazy. He finally did it. Finally rhymes it.
And honestly, the first time he ever wrote a hummable tune, I'm just going to go out and say it.
You don't think All of Anyone Can Whistle is just...
I often think back on that season, and there is a couple of songs that, if you wanted to be mean, I could take on and be like, this is the example of why people said you couldn't hum his songs. Like, there's a couple of things in there. It's like, oof, okay, well.
Grass is green, sky is blue.
Yeah. It's like,
I get it. Like, okay, with the naysayers say, it's like, oh, okay, maybe let's not start there. You're right.
So they do start to sing back and forth here now. So Hinckley starts, but we're kind of going back and forth here, line by line, which is, I would come take you from your life. I would come take you from your cell. You would be queen to me, not wife. I would crawl belly deep through hell. Baby, I die for you. Baby, I die for you. Even though I will always know.
I would come take you from your life.
I would come take you from your cell.
You would be queen to me, not wife.
I would crawl belly deep through hell.
Baby, I'd die for you.
Baby, I'd die for you.
Even though I will always know.
It's where we see how it's like, although their motivations are different, although they're approaching this from different perspectives, we finally start to see that they have, this is what they have in common, that they're agreeing upon something. They're unworthy of this love from Jody and Charlie here. And it's like in that moment that they sort of click together.
Yeah, there's this understanding of, I guess, the things you would do. Fundamentally different in that, like, Hinckley has never met Jodie Foster at all. There's that difference between, like, I'm going to take you from your life, mm-hmm. right? Which it has a sinister connotation in my reading of this too. He doesn't mean it that way, but there is something weird when it's like, if I came up to you and say, hey Chris, I'm going to take you from your life, I don't know, it's like, I don't know if I'm interested in that necessarily.
Thank you so much, but well, and what's interesting, the last thing that they sing before they so like Hinckley sings, tell me how I can earn your love, set me free, and she sings, let me be worthy of your love, set you free. Also, yeah. On one of the recordings, I heard that she also says, set me free. And we're, she's talking about him in prison, and maybe one of the people thought, or maybe it's just a different, addition along the way that was one way one time, and then it was edited later. But I thought for all the parallels, for there to be just that distinction of who's setting who free and to where.
I think that's a good call out here, and just being a stickler for that word choice. For me too, it's very different how both of them are. I think how we're supposed to interpret how both of them say, "Baby, I die for you." Hinckley is coming from a motivation of like, this is what you say to your like beloved, right? It's like, oh, I would die for you. Like, that's how much I love you.
Right.
Where Frome is like literally saying, I'm going to die for you. Like, I would do that.
Mm-hmm. Love.
What can you say? Assassins is secretly like a rom-com, actually, when you think about it. The ending of this song comes and they come together and sing, I am unworthy of your love, Jody/Charlie darlin'. Let me prove/be worthy of your love. I'll find a way to earn your love, wait and see. Then you will turn your love to me, your love to me.
I am unworthy of your love, Jody darling. Let me prove worthy of your love. I'll find a way to earn your love, wait and see. Then you will turn your love to me. Your love to me.
In some cases, there's also a bit of dialogue here at the end, too, where Hinckley goes, he died so our love could live. And then you'll hear the actor playing Ronald Reagan. I don't think it's a recording of Reagan himself, but who goes, sorry, Nancy, looks like I forgot to duck. I sure hope that surgeon's a Republican. Where'd that kid learn to shoot? The Russian army? There you go again. Which, interestingly enough, if people don't know, Reagan did use his assassination attempt as like a punchline for most of his speeches for the rest of his presidency. Like, he actually would get people, you can read up about this, I'm not making this up. He would get someone with like a balloon at the back of the auditorium to pop it so he could be like, oh, miss me, and worked it into his like old folksy charm that he was known for.
Yeah, we're seeing that a little bit in the modern day as well.
Right. It's all pomp and circumstance. Let's talk about this ending here a little bit. I do think it's interesting that the one word specifically, like, it makes sense why Jody and Charlie are being sung differently, right? Depending on the actor or actress who's singing. But then let me prove, which I believe is the Hinckley line, let me be worthy of your love is the Frome line. So those two words being different are interesting to me, that they sing them overlapping each other.
Both of the ones I have, even like they both sound prove for both of them.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, all I have is my photocopies from my like finishing the hat books. Not to derail a point here, but this one just says let me prove, whereas earlier it says Jody/Charlie.
Well, maybe I have wrong intel here then.
Not to derail this point,
but regardless, how do we feel about this ending piece?
Okay, so yeah, I think it's very much that it's that. So Frome was more of the one that needs to prove herself, right? To the ultimate test sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And Hinckley is more just let me be. Like, I don't know what I can do, but just let me be it, whatever that means, however I can get there. Let me be worthy.
Yeah, as you're saying that, it does seem to be like this fundamental difference of a person like struggling, like, I have no idea what you want me to do, versus a character like, just allow me to do this. Like, I'm ready and willing to go. I know what you want me to do. I'll do, and just tell me to do it, and I'll go and do it. So like, there's these two fundamentally different.
Yeah, let me just be loved through who I am and
mm-hmm.
and my personality and
right.
The other one is versus my actions. I will show you the manifestation of my love. Overall,
like, because you've seen that one production, how did it land for you while watching that production?
It's such a it feels just like whiplash, because it feels like I'm like you're transported to something else for a moment. Like it's a love story or love stories, whichever, and it's totally such a big shift. And like you were saying, it's a hummable, lovely song.
Mm-hmm.
that just seems, at first glance, just out of place. And then when you start thinking about what's happening on top of this, on top of this, on top of this, then you're like, oh, unfortunately, this fits right in here. This is just another lens, another viewpoint for these other characters.
And I think, again, I think it is interesting to point out that not only John Hinckley, but Charles Manson himself was a self-styled musician. So that we're all wrapped up in this style of music. So it's interesting. Like what comes across is a little bit more like unhip, I guess, for lack of a better word, just as compared to like the Led Zeppelins and the other types of musicians that were going to be out at this exact same time, that this is the music that inspired, or not inspired, but was like done by people who would go and try and commit such disturbing acts of violence.
It seems too peaceful and too
right.
Make love, not war.
Yeah, so it seems like there's a bit at odds there. I was also thinking, is this the most contemporary Sondheim ever got?
Ooh.
Is this like did he ever try to write 80s music or 90s music? Like, I mean, sure there's like synthesizers in the score of Sunday in the Park, but I wouldn't necessarily call that like 80s sounding music either.
Oh, sure. Right. Now, I'll admit, I have not done much with the newest show.
I still don't even think that fits.
Maybe.
He had a very musical theater style sounding music, but like this one does sound like, oh yeah, I could see someone singing this as a 70s ballad.
I'm trying to think. I feel like maybe something from Passion feels a little, but it's been a while since I've visited that.
I would love people to write in if they can think of something that
no one has ever loved. It seems very different.
Sure, yeah. I love to hear other people's thoughts on this, though. Of like, is there another song that Sondheim wrote that intentionally he was trying to make sound contemporary, but like 80s, 90s, early 2000s? I don't know. Maybe there is something very obvious that I'm just not thinking of.
Yeah, when there's so much to think about, it gets kind of it's hard. It's hard to think of it all.
Yeah. All right. Well, as we're wrapping up here, was there anything that we didn't talk about that you think we should?
I think one of my favorite things, especially when preparing for this for today, going through different video recordings that I could find, and just always wondering, is he going to play the guitar, or is it going to be a really fake, I'm going to pretend to play?
But there's backing music.
Right. Because I mean, with all of them, I think even like whenever I saw it, he played the guitar, and then at some point, he dropped out and the pit took over.
Right.
There was one that I was watching that, well, if you don't move your hand, the chord can't change. So, that's
funny.
It's like, I get that not everyone's going to be able to play everything, but it was funny to just go through and go, okay. I love the way he read that. And now he's starting to play. Just kidding. He is not starting to play. Someone is playing beautifully, and he is up there.
It's always that thing, whenever there's an instrument that is important inside of a show, whether or not the actor on stage is going to play it, because I find it happens the most often with like horns and stuff like that. It's like, you are very obviously not playing that instrument, like very obviously not playing that instrument.
But sure, that's not a big deal because it's such a small part of it. But whereas like if Orpheus in Hadestown, if that person wasn't,
oh sure,
if they didn't play, then that takes you out of the moment. Whereas this is, it's a musical. Like I'm not expecting this person to be able to pick up the guitar.
The one aspect I wish I could speak to a little bit more intelligently. Unfortunately, I really just do focus on the lyrics in this show primarily. I do know that there is like the chord progression from Hail to the Chief that gets sprinkled through a bunch of songs throughout the show, and I don't know if it actually happens in this one. My gut suspicion is it probably does somewhere where it's still in there, just in an alternate way. But unfortunately, I can't point to the time that it actually happens, or if it happens inside this song.
I'm not sure off the top of my head either. In this moment, I'm just thinking Sondheim. I'm not thinking Hail to the Chief, so I couldn't even.
Yeah. It's kind of like that Bean theme in Into the Woods, where it gets sprinkled through the entire score in very random, well, I shouldn't say random, in very specific moments throughout that show. Same thing here. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today, Chris. For a last question, the thing I've been asking every single person this season is that because this show involves so many different plot lines of real people, do you think that you could pluck out one of the storylines and have it be its own musical? Obviously not with like Sondheim or Weidman's involvement in it, but do you think there's a story there that could support an entire show of just this one person's storyline?
I mean, I don't want to cheat and say John Wilkes Booth or Lee Harvey Oswald, just
Sure.
because of his.
Has there been Lincoln adaptations? I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, and just probably because those are the ones I'm most familiar with, so that feels like cheating. But I mean, I really think that and sure, it's those we're talking about it, but I think a some sort of Hinckley walkthrough would be interesting, just
Mhm.
because the motivation is so different than a bunch of the other characters.
Sure.
It's not for political reasons. It's not driven necessarily by fame.
Yeah, it really is. Like he just wants to win the heart of a girl. I mean, it's so weird, perverted, and I mean, it is dumb at the same time. But it's like, yeah, he's so hell bent on this idea that this is going to be the thing that makes her notice him. It's like she'll notice you for sure, but like this is not the way that you're gonna start a relationship.
Right. And I mean, I think throwing in, his own musicianship, there's
Mhm.
something to be said there. And I think it could, maybe more so than some of the other storylines here, that it could come across, it could be so much more of a slow burn thriller almost, that
Mhm.
it's just unsettling a lot of the time. And I mean,
Yeah.
not to not to say this, but it seems very much like that might be a movie that Jodie Foster would be in, like a.
Weirdly enough, I was about to say something, maybe not like a direct adaptation,
Mhm.
but I wonder if she's ever been interested in doing that, like investigating from her point of view, a storyline of, yes, being stalked by somebody.
Right, because it just seems so it just seems, not that Jodie Foster only does one type of movie, but she does that type of movie very well.
Yes, yes.
And just coming back to that, it's kind of a slow burn, and maybe
Hmm.
it's a little bit uncomfortable, but you're watching it. Are you familiar with Sufjan Stevens?
Yes, very much so.
Great. Well, like his John Wayne Gacy Jr. song.
John Wayne Gacy Jr., that song always makes me cry
Yeah, I
when I
mean,
listen to it.
He'd kill 10,000 people with a sleight of his hand, running far, running fast to the dead. He took off all their clothes for them. He put a cloth on their lips, quiet hands, quiet kiss on the mouth. In my best behavior, I am really just like him.
Not because it's evangelizing him, because it focuses on the victims. And I think that's the key to that song working.
And then the flip turn at the end of "and on my best behavior, I'm really just like him." And
Right.
I feel like there's something. Maybe it's just because we're talking about two different assassins and murderer would be attempt, but there's something just similarly dark about those two
Yeah,
stories.
yeah.
That's like, when you ask me that question, like that's immediately what jumped to my mind, is that not that I would want to see a John Wayne Gacy show, but it would probably be good.
Sure. It could be. Yeah.
With music, and so
Mhm.
yeah, I would say that there's something more than just historical could maybe be brought with the story of Hinckley.
Well, once again, thank you so much for joining me. If people wanted to, stay in contact with you, see what you're up to, is there a way to do so online?
Yeah, so since my name's Chris Brown, and there's quite a few of us out there,
Is there?
there's
Interesting.
there's one or two. Like my Instagram is not _Chris Brown. That's how people can find me. Hopefully, maybe this next season, I'm looking to even audition for a production of Assassins, and so that could be something that maybe someone could find me at. And I'm not sure which role I would go for. Probably not Squeaky.
No, that's probably safe. I mean, Gateau is the scene stealer. Like that's the role you want.
Yeah, and thinking about some of the characters and how this is much more. Not that I would compare this to Cats, but
a phrase I was not anticipating hearing in my discussion of Assassins.
but in the same way that it's kind of a musical review, and this character pops out, and you get to hear their story.
As a complete aside, I would absolutely adore going to see Cats: The Jellicle Ball, the reinterpretation of Cats
Oh,
is
yeah.
currently going on.
I think it would be it's at least something different, and
Yeah.
But after doing the Baker for Into the Woods, and that's just one character, very like I think it might be fun to be such a different character that might be available in this show.
Mhm.
John Wilkes Booth is still pretty straight laced character in a lot of ways, whereas with these, there's a lot more people that have it's a smaller role maybe, but
Yeah.
they have their bursts throughout the musical.
I will say though that John Wilkes Booth gets one of the best monologues in this show. If you care about the acting portion
That's a
versus
lot
just
to
the singing and
memorize.
acting,
That's a lot.
it's so much. Yeah. Anyways, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kyle.
Thank you so much for listening. You can send emails to puttingittogetherpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow Sondheim Podcast on Twitter or Instagram. This is an independent production, and you can support the show by going to patreon.com/puttingittogetherpodcast. Putting It Together is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts from. Consider subscribing so that you never miss an episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Ballad of Gateau. Some weeks it really does feel like I'm cakewalking up the gallows. As always, a big thank you to the great Chris Taniguchi, who designed the podcast artwork, and to Nick Driscoll for composing our theme music. Well, we've reached the end of our episode. Yes, I know. Goodbye for now.